Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a story that is so utterly bizarre, so profoundly disturbing, that if it wasn't for the fact that it's meticulously documented medical history,
Yeah.
you'd dismiss it as a legend.
Instantly, yeah. We're talking about late 18th century France, and our sources they're not folktales, they're official hospital records.
Right.
Anatomical descriptions from French physicians, men like Dr. Percy, Dr. Corville, who were faced with a patient who was, for lack of a better term, a biological impossibility.
And that's our mission today, isn't it? To try and understand this man, Tarrare. The sources describe him as maybe the hungriest human who ever lived, a biological black hole.
That's a good way to put it.
And we're going to trace his life from this sideshow performer to a military experiment, and then, well, to something much, much darker.
And I think to really get a sense of the scale of this, we have to start where the doctors did, with the most immediate, inescapable detail about him.
The stench.
The stench. I mean, just try to imagine it. You're walking into a military hospital, a place already full of, well, unpleasant smells.
Of course.
And you encounter an odor coming off one person that is so powerful, so foul, that seasoned doctors couldn't get within 20 paces of him.
That number 20 paces.
Mm.
It shows up again and again in the documents. And this wasn't just, bad hygiene. Everyone had bad hygiene then. This was something else entirely.
This was on another level. This signals a biological catastrophe in progress. It suggests that the sheer volume of things he was eating, and we'll get into what those things were, wasn't being processed.
It was just rotting inside him.
Essentially, yeah. Massive internal fermentation, a toxic metabolic output that his body was just venting through his skin, his breath. He was a walking biohazard.
And if the smell was the first thing you noticed, his appearance was the second.
The sources paint this really disturbing picture of elasticity. Even when he was starving, his skin just hung off him. The description they use is like a deflated balloon, and that's a really critical clue. That loose skin tells you his body was permanently changed, built for enormous capacity. It means his stomach, his whole abdominal cavity, could stretch to such an incredible degree that when it was empty...
There was nothing to hold his skin up.
Exactly. The external tissue just collapsed. His body was a giant elastic sack, always ready for the next impossible meal.
And the way he got the food in, that's maybe even more horrifying. His jaw could apparently unhinge like a snake's.
Like a python, yeah.
And when he opened his mouth, his throat was so wide that they said you could see all the way down into his stomach.
And that's where you really cross from medical anomaly into, the stuff of nightmares. That visible, stretched-out gullet, it confirms the whole thing. A normal person's esophagus just doesn't do that.
So this wasn't just a guy who was big. He was built differently. Fundamentally, anatomically different.
Completely. And that anatomical difference is what set the stage for his entire tragic life.
Okay, so let's get into that. His early life. The sources say his existence defied the laws of biology. That's a pretty bold claim.
Yeah.
This couldn't have been just a psychological issue, right? An eating disorder.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, while there are severe compulsive eating disorders, Tarrare's case is just screaming physiological pathology. He was in a constant state of agonizing starvation, even right after he'd eaten a massive amount of food.
So his body wasn't getting the message that he was full.
It was more than that. It suggests one of two things, or probably a combination of both. Either his metabolism was running unbelievably hot, just burning through fuel at an insane rate.
Like a human furnace.
Exactly. Or, and this is crucial, his body was catastrophically bad at actually absorbing any nutrition from what he ate. He was eating, but he wasn't getting the benefit.
And the scale of this starts so young. As a teenager, the records claim he could eat a quarter of a cow in a single day.
Yeah.
And still be hungry. Let's just sit with that number for a second. A quarter of a cow.
We really have to. In the 18th century, that's hundreds of pounds of meat, organs, bone. We're talking about a caloric intake of, well over 100,000 calories in one day.
When a normal man eats maybe 2,500.
The numbers are just staggering. They defy belief. And it explains the anatomy we just talked about. The elastic skin, the giant gullet. They weren't exaggerations. They were necessities for him to even function.
And right away, that biological need creates this impossible problem for his family.
Of course it does. How could any normal family afford that? In pre-industrial France, food is a precious resource. His existence would have bankrupted them.
They kick him out.
They had no choice. He wasn't thrown out for being a criminal or a bad person. He was exiled because his body's demands were more than a family unit could possibly provide. His own biology guaranteed he'd be an outcast.
Which sets him on this path of desperation. He's roaming the countryside, he falls in with thieves, prostitutes, and he has to find a way to eat.
And the only valuable thing he has is his horrifying ability. He can't work a normal job. He'd burn more calories than he could earn to buy food with, so he has to turn himself into a spectacle, a circus freak.
He monetizes the horror.
He has to. It's the only way to feed the furnace. And this is the moment he transitions from being just a family's problem to a public curiosity, a grotesque performance.
Before we get to the performance itself, what do we think was actually wrong with him medically? I know they didn't have the tools then, but with modern knowledge, what are the theories?
Well, it's all speculation, of course, but one possibility is a major problem with his hypothalamus.
That's the part of the brain that controls hunger.
Hunger, thirst, body temperature. Yeah. If the put that tells you the satiety center was damaged or just not there, the stop eating signal would never fire. He would feel perpetually starved.
Or maybe something with his hormones.
That's another strong possibility. An extreme endocrine disorder, like a form of hyperthyroidism that was just completely off the charts. But even that struggles to explain the sheer volume of matter he could consume.
So it's more likely his body just wasn't absorbing anything. He's eating a cow, but only getting the energy from, what, a loaf of bread?
Something like that, yes. A catastrophic failure in nutrient absorption. So he's constantly, desperately seeking more fuel because, on a cellular level, he is starving. His entire life was just this endless, torturous loop of eating without ever feeling full.
A truly horrifying existence. Which brings us to his act, the performance that he developed to survive.
And it was simple, but deeply terrifying. This wasn't a show about fine dining. This was about consuming the inedible.
So we're talking about non-food items. The sources mention corks, stones.
Whole baskets of apples swallowed without chewing. And we need to think about the mechanics of that. Swallowing something dense like a stone or bulky and rough like a cork, it requires not just a huge esophagus, but an incredibly tough stomach lining.
A normal person would perforate their intestines immediately.
Immediately. It would be a fatal medical emergency. His stomach must have been like a leather bag, exceptionally muscular, with a lining that could withstand constant abuse and abrasion. He was a human garbage disposal.
But then the act takes a turn. It shifts from just a bizarre anomaly to something genuinely monstrous.
Yes.
The consumption of live animals.
This is where his primal drive just completely overwhelms everything else.
Yeah.
And the doctors who watched him, they documented it in shocking detail.
Let's talk about the cat. It's the most infamous example.
It is. He would take a live cat in front of a crowd, kill it with his teeth, drink its blood, and then swallow it.
And later, he would vomit up its fur and bone.
Yes, and the description the doctors used is so telling. They said he vomited up like an owl.
An owl pellet.
Exactly. And that's not just a colorful description. It's a profound biological observation. It means his digestive system, for all its capacity, was still filtering. It was breaking down the soft tissue, the muscle, the fluids, the things with caloric value, and then systematically rejecting the indigestible parts.
So his body was treating a living creature as just raw material, a collection of components to be processed.
Precisely. The hunger was so all-consuming that it just bypassed any higher brain function. Empathy, disgust, morality, none of it mattered. It wasn't about wanting food. It was about needing input. Any input. His body was just an insatiable void.
Which makes you wonder about the audience. Who pays to watch something like that?
Well, you have to remember the time. The human body was still a huge mystery, and people were fascinated by the grotesque, by outliers. Tarrare was the ultimate freak show because he showed them the absolute limits of being human.
He was a monster, but a captivating one.
He was. He was a living, breathing violation of the natural order.
Yeah.
And people are always, for better or worse, drawn to that. They paid to see the impossible, even if it was horrifying.
It's hard to imagine what that must have done to him, psychologically, to be this object of horror, constantly driven by this pain.
All the accounts suggest he was miserable. He was weak, apathetic, isolated. This wasn't a choice for him. It was a prison. He was trapped inside a body that was constantly betraying him.
And that desperation, that need for a steady supply of anything to eat, is what led him to join the French Revolutionary Army.
Which is deeply ironic. He likely saw it as the ultimate solution, a guaranteed source of rations every single day.
But of course, standard military rations were, as the source says, nowhere near enough.
Not even close. This is the great paradox of Tarrare. The man who could eat anything was constantly on the verge of starvation. The army's efficient supply chain couldn't even begin to meet his needs.
So he gets sick. He's exhausted, malnourished, wasting away.
Right. His incredible ability actually made him completely unfit for service. And he ends up in a military hospital where he stops being a soldier and becomes a scientific specimen.
And this is where the doctors, like Dr. Percy, start to get really interested.
Yeah.
They see him not as a patient to be cured, but as a phenomenon to be studied.
It's a really interesting ethical moment. They basically put normal patient care on hold because their scientific curiosity took over. They had a living, breathing biological impossibility in their ward, and they needed to know how it worked.
So they start running tests. And these tests are just as horrifying as his street performances. Let's start with the volume test.
The main one, yeah. They gave him a meal that was meant for 15 laborers.
15 men.
15 men. And he ate the entire thing in one sitting without stopping. And it's what happened after that's so fascinating.
He just falls asleep.
Instantly, a deep, almost comatose sleep. And the doctors observed a visible vapor rising from his body.
Like steam.
It's like steam. It suggests extreme thermogenesis, a massive, rapid generation of heat. His body was shunting every last bit of energy away from consciousness, away from movement, and diverting it all to the monumental task of digestion. It was like a computer shutting down all non-essential programs to run one massive calculation.
And they didn't just test volume. They tested what he could swallow. The live eel.
Yes, and it's a crucial detail that he crushed its head with his teeth before swallowing it whole. This wasn't an accident. This was a controlled, observed experiment. The medical establishment was documenting a man behaving like a predatory animal.
This is wild. But somehow, in all this horror, the military sees an opportunity.
Pure pragmatism. It's bizarre, but you can almost see the logic. They needed a spy, a courier who couldn't be caught with a message.
And Tarrare had a unique internal storage compartment.
Exactly. The plan was he would swallow a small wooden box with a secret message inside. He'd cross enemy lines, and then they'd retrieve the box from his stool.
A biological dead drop.
A literal one, yes.
Yep.
The perfect, untraceable courier, in theory.
But the reality was a complete disaster.
An immediate, predictable disaster. How could he possibly be a spy? His stench announced his presence from 20 paces. His appearance was unforgettable. He was the most conspicuous person in all of France.
So he was captured almost instantly.
Immediately. He was beaten, put through a mock execution, and then sent back in disgrace. His one unique biological skill was completely useless in the real world because the side effects of his condition made him a social pariah.
And that experience, the capture, the beating, it seems to have broken something in him.
It did. That trauma, combined with the constant agonizing hunger, pushed him over an edge. He came back to the hospital not as a failed spy, but as something much more dangerous.
This is where his story gets really dark. He returns to the hospital, and the sources say his hunger itself became dark. He starts to wander the halls at night, like a ghoul.
That's the perfect word for it, the ghoul. He wasn't performing anymore. He was just scavenging, driven by this desperate nocturnal instinct. He'd lost his structured food source from the military, so he started hunting within the hospital itself.
And the things he did turned the hospital into a living nightmare for the staff.
The records are just a list of escalating horrors. He was caught drinking the blood from patients who were undergoing bloodletting.
Which was a common procedure, so there would have been bowls of it just available.
Exactly. He was exploiting the medical environment for his own needs. But it got worse. He started going to the morgue.
Attempting to eat the flesh of corpses.
Yes. Necrophagia, that's the ultimate taboo. It shows a complete collapse of any human restraint. The biological drive had completely taken over. He was even seen eating used poultices and bandages, anything soaked in bodily fluids.
Is indiscriminately consuming the decay of the hospital. It's hard to fathom. Which brings up the question of the doctors. They saw all of this happening, and yet they kept him there. They were fascinated.
They were. This was the peak of Enlightenment-era science, this obsession with classifying and understanding anomalies. Tarrare was the ultimate anomaly. They saw him less as a patient and more as a living experiment.
So curiosity trumped safety.
It seems so. They were terrified of him, but the desire to understand the furnace inside him was stronger. They tolerated a predator in their wards because they wanted to see what it would do next.
And eventually they found out. The turning point. The disappearance of a 14-month-old toddler from one of the wards.
The end of the experiment. And the sources are very clear. There was no body, no witness, no hard evidence, but the entire staff, they just knew.
They knew it was Tarrare.
Their collective certainty tells you everything. His behavior had escalated to the point where this unspeakable act was the only logical, horrifying conclusion. He had finally crossed a line that even their scientific curiosity couldn't ignore.
And their reaction was immediate. They chased him out of the hospital.
Threw him out. He was a pariah once again, but this time, he wasn't just a freak. He was a suspected murderer, a monster, and he vanished.
For 4 years, he's just gone, and then he reappears in a hospital in Versailles. He's dying.
Dying of tuberculosis. But he has this one last strange story to tell the doctors. He claims that he swallowed a golden fork 2 years prior, and that's what's finally killing him.
Which is such a strange detail, almost like he needed a simple, tangible reason for why his body was finally failing him.
Exactly. After a lifetime of eating everything, he focuses on this one single object, maybe delusion, maybe a final attempt to make sense of the rot inside him.
And when he dies, the doctors finally get their chance to look inside, to see the engine of the furnace.
The autopsy was a gruesome necessity. They had to know.
And the first thing they discovered?
No golden fork. His final story was just that, a story. What they found instead was, as they put it, a nightmare.
Let's go through the findings. What did they see?
First, they confirmed what they'd seen when he was alive. His gullet was abnormally, permanently widened. Then they saw the results of a lifetime of overload. His liver and his gallbladder were enormous.
What does that mean for the listener? An enlarged liver.
It means his body's chemical processing plant, the liver, had been in a state of severe chronic overdrive for his entire life. It had become pathologically enlarged just trying to process the sheer volume of fats and toxins he was consuming. It was working itself to death.
And the internal state wasn't just oversized, it was infected. The report says his body was filled with pus.
Pervasive systemic infection, widespread abscesses. It was the direct result of everything he'd eaten. The stones, the corks, the decaying animals, the septic hospital waste, the smell that had defined his entire life. This was the source. He was quite literally rotting from the inside out.
And that stench, it had one last role to play, didn't it?
It did. The smell during the autopsy was so overpowering, so foul, that the surgeons had to stop. They couldn't finish the procedure.
So even in death, he defied their analysis.
He remained a biological anomaly to the very end, the furnace that drove him and made him so toxic that he was untouchable, even on the autopsy table. He died just as he lived, empty, rotting, and completely alone.
So when we put it all together, his life wasn't really a series of choices, was it? It was just this endless, torturous act of eating.
That's all it was. He was a man consumed by the very process that was supposed to sustain him. He ate constantly, but he was never nourished, always starving.
The black hole metaphor really is perfect. He just swallowed everything in his path. Food, animals, morality, his own life.
And his story, for anyone learning about it, is just this grotesque but powerful reminder of how fragile our own bodies are. It shows you what happens when the basic systems that keep us in balance just completely catastrophically fail.
So in the end, after everything he consumed, what was he left with?
Nothing. The constant hunger left him fundamentally empty. His story is a medical horror story, an absolute benchmark for just how wrong human physiology can go.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the documented yet unbelievable life of Tarrare. It's a story that really challenges every assumption we have about the human body.
It truly is. His case remains an unmatched anomaly in the annals of medical history.
And here is a final provocative thought for you to mull over. If Tarrare's condition was purely physiological, a rare, total malfunction of the digestive system that left his body in a state of perpetual agonizing starvation, does that mean his terrifying actions, including the suspected murder of the toddler, were an unavoidable result of biology, overriding any failure of morality or conscious choice? Was he a system that biologically demanded the monstrous, or a man who succumbed to temptation?
That is for you to consider as you reflect on the extreme boundaries of human existence.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.